because obviously you know the not at all like the other way they but I'm all I'm supposed to and the man is about what you are and you know where you are supposed to sit.
I know that one sheet, but I don't know.
No, it's fine because they will be staying behind.
Anyway, except where there's white.
One, two, testing, 1, 2.
Assistant to the TV is supposed to Misuli. This is advisor. All right, I got and some of the family. Behind him is the I think you can just see the sniper.
The white sheets with where exactly?
There in front. We have to sit somewhere special. Yeah, it's an honest.
As long as you're okay, I'm okay.
Good.
You take that glasses? Are you going to the Wednesday?
You can sit where I have I used to go with Michael Reader, but I have to go.
Oh, I see.
The one that is on They're going to be starting off. They're going to just behind the VC you're sitting. You right?
and check if there's still space.
Before we start, let's have a moment of silence for Gaza. Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Christy van der Westhuizen. I'm a professor of sociology here at the University of the Western Cape. I am very honored to be a program director today. The Human Resources Leadership Series is in its second edition this year. And, we are very privileged to be hosting it through the Human Resources Department of UWC and particularly through the Office of the Executive Director of Human Resources, Mr. Malvida. This Human Resources Leadership Series is a contribution to UWC's commitment to the nurturance of ethical and effective leadership. The inaugural lecture happened just less than a year ago with the Auditor General of South Africa, Ms. Sakani Maruleti, who was the keynote speaker, and she at the time underscored the importance of healthy institutions in helping populations to thrive. In preparation for today's event, I was reading a new South African book with the title This Generation Leads, which is published by UJ Press. And it contains a chapter on ethical leadership written by Zippo Buthelezi, who's a young business leader in the mining industry. And he tells us that the word leader is derived from an old English word that means to go before as a guide. So let us pause for a moment at that thought. A leader being somebody who goes before as a guide. What would this then mean when we combine it with the idea of ethics as an ethical leadership? So Zippo Buthelezi highlights the following characteristics of ethical leadership: integrity, competence, responsibility, accountability, fairness, and transparency. So these are the characteristics that those who guide should internalize and make part of themselves. But as we know, in South Africa, the opposite has been happening. And as Zippo Buthelezi writes in his chapter on ethical leadership, I quote, "Many of our core state and private listed organizations have been embroiled in ethical failures, usually from a governance of ethics standpoint, and have been implicated in wasteful expenditure, employee intimidation, procurement fraud, employee and leadership incompetence, and the inability to meet the core mandates for which they were initially formed." Of course, the Office of Public Protector is the central agency tasked with addressing such ethical failures when they happen in public office. Indeed, we can say that it's been the central bulwark in stemming malfeasance in the public sector in South Africa. It's created as one of the Chapter 9 institutions in the Constitution. It has the power to investigate any conduct suspected to be improper in state affairs or any sphere of the public administration, to report on it and to take remedial action. Significantly, the Public Protector's mandate includes direct reference to the public. According to Clause 182(4) of the Constitution, Public Protector's office must be accessible to all persons and communities. So there's a direct link that's being drawn. The Public Protector fulfills a vital function in our constitutional democracy in protecting the people of our country against public sector abuses. Therefore, the question of ethical leadership, of course, lies at the heart of the Office of the Public Protector and what she does. Today we will hear from our dignitaries and, most importantly, from our keynote speaker, Advocate Taleka, and we will then open the floor to hear from our audience. I will now hand over to our Vice Chancellor, Professor Robert Balfour, to do the welcoming. Let me briefly just tell you about our VC, Robert John Balfour. He completed his doctoral degree in English Language Acquisition and Applied Linguistics in Education in Cambridge in 2000, before moving to English Studies at UKZN, where he taught in post-colonial literature and in education as a specialist in language policy and planning for higher education. He has published on post-colonial identities, multilingualism and inclusion in South Africa and beyond. Previously, he was a registrar at the St. Augustine College of South Africa. He was appointed as Professor and Dean of the Faculty of Education Sciences at Northwest University in 2011, before becoming DDC, teaching and learning there. And he assumed office as the 8th Rector and Vice Chancellor of the University of the Western Cape in 2024. He is a painter, he is a writer of poetry, and he continues to publish widely. He has been an NRF-rated academic since 2010. Prof. Balfour, please come to the microphone.
Goedemiddag and a very warm welcome to everybody gathered here. I want to begin by thanking our program director, Prof. van der Westhuizen. I want to acknowledge our executive director for HR, Mr. Megida, and the leadership of our human resources team in putting the series together. It's a wonderful opportunity to contemplate and also reflect on leading in our respective spaces, to recognize members of the executive present at UWC, our deans of faculties present, our members of the Student Representative Council, our student leadership, colleagues and distinguished guests, and of course the Student Media Office. I want to recognize an institutional advancement from the Public Protector's Office, Mr. Lamula, Ms. Zaula, Mr. Troms, Ms. Kumalo, and Mr. Anisi. You are all welcome here. It's such a huge pleasure and an honor to welcome our Public Protector to this space. I feel really humbled by it, and as Public Protector, our keynote speaker this afternoon offers a range of experience to share and insights, particularly in relation to ethical leadership. So Advocate Taleka, a very, very warm welcome to you. We so look forward to hearing from you. It's also fitting that in August, this special month, we have two prominent women hosting and leading this event. And I do want to encourage all of us, please, to visit the UWC webpage to see the full array of events that are being offered in August as Women's Month by our UWC community, for our community, our whole community. At a time when questions of trust and ethical leadership are central to public discourse, focus on institutional governance in transition is both relevant and necessary. In South Africa and elsewhere, confidence in public institutions has been strained by political shifts, economic pressures, and the widening gap between policy commitments on the one hand and lived experience on the other. We express and we feel public frustrations in the inefficacy of leadership and leadership failures. In this environment, we cannot assume that trust can be assumed. It has to be earned, it has to be demonstrated over and over again, and it's evident that transparent, principled, and responsive leadership are critical to building trust in that environment. As public sector professionals and citizens in our wonderful country, it is our responsibility to not only help institutions to manage these transitions, but to strengthen their legitimacy by promoting ethical leadership and practicing it from within at every given opportunity that we have. One useful way of thinking about the challenge is through critical scholarship, and that of course is special about a university as a place. It's an opportunity for universities in the exercise of critical scholarship and leadership then to ground our thinking in praxis that then arises in reflection, that the reflection of course informs the scholarly work in this virtuous cycle. And through that process of reflection and practice, we contribute to leadership that creates the restoration that is possible in our country. So even in our individual day-to-day work, there are critical moments and opportunities for us to build public trust, to contribute to a scholarship that engages in the development of public trust, and to be restorative in all our efforts. Mzala Khumalo was one such public intellectual who was a member of the ANC SACP many years ago, and was deeply concerned with how power is exercised when leadership is practiced. Contributors to his important work show us that trust cannot be restored through frameworks alone. It requires principled action. And I want to reflect on that principled action, which is a foundation in the rebuilding of trust, but is also a part of what it means to be at a university. A university such as ours is not only the contemplative and the restorative, reflexive place, but it is the place where we identify the possibilities of principled action among us. Of course, principled action has got to be grounded, doesn't it, in order to be meaningful in a framework. And in our environment in South Africa, that is social justice. Principled action that is not informed by social justice runs that risk of disconnect to community and runs the risk of not contributing to restoring public confidence. So the early gains of our democracy, thinking back to the 1990s, risk being further eroded by policy inconsistency, yes, weak accountability, yes, administrative drift, but also by a lack of consistent effort in restoring public trust through discourses such as the one we will engage in today. Together, all our scholarship as a university is helpful in creating a public framework for the establishment and restoration of public trust. And it requires us to ask hard questions about accountability between institutions and communities, between stakeholders within institutions, between the entire sector of higher learning and the public it claims to serve. These perspectives help ground our leadership responsibilities within a wider institutional context. And it's worth remembering that conversations about ethics and leadership and governance do not take place in isolation. Conversations take place in deep legacies of historic inequality, pressing issues that have to be resolved by public and other officials, and of course the legacies we carry counter public demands on our service. So in seeking ways to respond constructively, to restore public trust, to build it in our day-to-day praxis, we can turn to the voices that have long engaged with these issues in scholarly terms, and we can also turn to the credible officers of our democracy, as we are doing today with the visit of our public protector. I want to remind us that our resources are many, in fact. We have intellectual resources at our disposal. We have actions at our disposal. We can and do, in fact, do a lot to restore public trust in our environment through how we engage and how we undertake our scholarship. And I want to encourage all of us present, not only as professionals gathered here, but also our student leaders, our students, our staff, all of us who are here this afternoon, to learn both from the past, acknowledge the present, and to build institutions and leaders that the public can. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Isabel, for highlighting for us the centrality of universities as places of thinking, of places where principles are laid down, where principles are debated, where we make sense of the values of our society. So thank you very much for that. We will now hear from Mr. Nico Magida, who's the Executive Director of Human Resources. Mr. Magida is a registered master HR professional generalist with the South African Board for People Practices. He's an admitted and practicing attorney of the High Court of South Africa. He is the chairperson of the board of the directors of Sheraton Textiles, which is a registered company that was established in 1920 and which is 100% owned by the IDC. His highest qualifications is a master's degree specializing in employment and labor law. He's also completed a senior management development program at the University of Stellenbosch Business School and has received formal HR management and executive education training at the Harvard Business School in Boston, USA, and lastly also completed an advanced management and leadership development program at Oxford University. So I want to invite Mr. Magida to the front here to tell us more about the reasoning behind putting together this Human Resources Leadership Series.
Thank you, Program Director, Director, Public Protector, DVC, Deans, colleagues and leadership of the university, student leadership, members of the union that are here in the leadership, all the stakeholders of the university that are present in this event, my team from the HR department have been behind in this program. We've supported it a long times and always encouraged us to continue despite the challenges that we've been experiencing. Everyone who has joined us and those that are joining us also virtually, I believe that this program is streamed live. And I want to thank everyone who has made time that today we came together. It is a rare privilege and an honor to host a very important person in the name of the Public Protector of South Africa, who's playing a very critical role in building values, in ensuring that issues of accountability, integrity, inclusivity, as well as the issue that we always talk about of competency and resilience are always held up in our. I want perhaps to give you a background as to the reason why we established this series. The Human Resource Leadership Series was established in 2024 as a strategic initiative by the Human Resource Department. Its primary objective is to foster leadership excellence, ethical practices, and transformative management within the university community. The series aligns with UWC Institutional Operating Plan, the IOP, particularly Goal 4, which is the People Framework, and Goal 8, which is the Leadership, Governance, and Management, emphasizing cultivation of effective leadership and governance practices at the university. The Human Resources Leadership Series at UWC serves as a platform for engaging thought leaders on critical issues of leadership, governance, and institutional development. The inaugural event, which was mentioned by the program director, featured the Auditor General of South Africa, Mr. Kani Maluleka. It was a resounding success, setting the stage for this Human Resource Leadership Series to become a cornerstone of UWC Leadership Development Agenda. Her topic, just to remind you, was bridging the gap, building ethical and effective leadership. The Auditor General of South Africa serves as a champion for good governance and accountability within the institutions of governance. Her office's vast experience in assessing leadership practices, internal controls, and identifying areas for improvement makes it very critical in terms of assisting us to be accountable and to ensure that we hold those that are in control of their leadership to account. Her participation in this series offered strategies for cultivation ethical leadership. She shared best practices for promoting ethical conduct with leadership roles across the public sector, including universities. She mentioned that it was critical promoting self-assessment and transparency. She shed light on public sector, including universities, on methods of leaders to engage in self-reflection and how to receive constructive feedback. She also mentioned that it was important to strengthen governance systems and to address strategies for building robust governance and frameworks that promote accountability and transparency across all leadership levels. This was followed by another very successful event where we hosted the chairman of ESCOM, Mr. Mteto Nyati. His topic was leading through the storm, navigating crisis and building resilience. This event focused on the critical need for effective leadership in public institutions, especially during times of crisis. The ESCOM energy crisis serves as a significant case study for understanding the challenges for managing complexity with far-reaching consequences. The energy crisis in South Africa began in 2007 when the demand for electricity exceeded the supply. ESCOM, as Africa's largest electricity supplier, which generates 95% of South Africa's energy, did not have a plan to deal with the situation, leading to widespread power blackouts, known as load shedding. To relieve pressure on the national grid, they had to come out with programs. Load shedding or planned blackouts had become a common concern in South Africa, and it implemented as a way to manage the demand on the national grid. Critics of ESCOM's energy policy, however, argue that the strategy undermines sustainable growth. Despite the demand management strategies that encourage the public to conserve energy, load shedding continues, and it continues till today. So that lecture explored various dimensions of this crisis, such as the causes, political and social factors, and the impact on the public. It further highlighted the importance of adapting the leadership styles to situations and the maturity of stakeholders. It also addressed the role of communication in managing public perception and gaining support during a crisis. Furthermore, the event examined the vital role of value-based leadership in ensuring that public universities maintain their core values and ethical standards. The event emphasized the need for public universities to be proactive in developing ethical standards. It also ensured that there are plans of fostering a culture of continuous learning and building resilience. It also stressed the importance of engaging with all stakeholders, including staff, students, and the broader community, in a transparent and participatory manner. Mr. Nyati's talk assisted and provided us with invaluable lessons on issues that we are grappling with as universities, such as governance, financial sustainability, and public accountability. Lastly, Mr. Nyati's insight into balancing the interests of governance, the public, and institutional employees offered a robust framework for resilient leadership. Colleagues, today we have invited Advocate Baleka to address the theme, strengthening institutional culture, public trust, and leadership transitions. This conversation follows her presentation will provide valuable insights applicable to UWC's vision and leadership framework. Universities as public institutions must maintain trust among students, staff, and external stakeholders. Issues such as administrative transparency, accountability, ethical leadership, and leadership transitions directly impacting institutional culture and effective management. Poorly managed leadership changes can lead to inefficiencies, conflicts, and disruptions in governance, while strong leadership can drive stability and transformation. The relevance about today's event talks to public distrust in institutions. In an era where public institutions are increasingly scrutinized for inefficiency and misconduct, trust-building strategies are critical for maintaining legitimacy. The second one is the issue of ethical leadership during crisis. Leadership in both governments and academia must navigate complex environments, balancing public accountability with internal challenges. Next one is about internal organic culture. A weakened institutional culture can lead to disengaged staff, diminished morale, and decline in performance, making it essential to restore value-based leadership. Of course, continuity versus change. Leaders must balance continuity with the need for transformation, ensuring that new leadership strengthens rather than disrupts institutional progress. The last one is about stakeholder expectations. Whether in public governance or higher education, staff and stakeholders demand consistency and stability from their leadership. So therefore, the reason why we have this series is the following, is to ensure that there are lessons in restoring trust. UWC leaders can gain insights into how the Public Protector's Office is rebuilding credibility and to apply these lessons into our internal governance. Again, ethical governance strategies. Faculty and administrators can lead best practices for fostering transparency and accountability. We're also looking forward to hearing about enhancing leadership integrity. We need to understand how public institutions rebuild from controversies, which can equip UWC leadership with tools to strengthen ethical leadership and decision-making. We want to hear about best practice in leadership transition so that we can gain practical insights into managing high levels of transitions while maintaining institutional integrity. We want to build institutional integrity and resilience. We want to hear from the public protector how we can ensure continuity and minimize disruptions in order to support a stable university environment. We also want to ensure that at the end of the day, we have developed a leadership pipeline so that UWC can implement strategies to prepare leadership for future transition so that we can be capable of leading in all areas that we cover. The future about this program, briefly, is that the momentum that we want to sustain is to ensure that the impact of this program continues through various dynamic components. One of them, we intend to introduce a podcast series, which will be a platform to share leadership insights and experiences to be accessed by students as well as whoever that is doing research. We also want to start an opinion blog, which will be a dedicated space for thought-provoking articles on leadership challenges and strategies. And lastly, we want to compile all these speeches and presentations in a book format. So these editions will reinforce this leadership series mission by reaching a broader audience, encouraging continuous engagement, and diversifying how leadership topics can be communicated. So the proposed podcast and blog initiatives will be introduced soon. And I'm glad that perhaps we have had a good attendance today so that people can understand that this is not the last event that we're going to have this year, but we're looking for further activities. I want to thank you for this.
Thanks a lot to Mr. Magida, shedding some light on UWC's role in the cultivation of ethical leadership. Without much ado, let me swiftly move along to our keynote speaker today. Advocate Kgaleka resumed her career as an aspirant prosecutor in 2004, and she left the National Prosecuting Authority in 2016 as a Senior Deputy Director of Public Prosecutions after 10 years of prosecutions and executive management at the High Court level. She was also a Specialist Prosecutor in Sexual Offences and Community Affairs Unit within the NPA, in which she dealt with, among others, areas of human trafficking, gender-based violence, drug trafficking, and children matters. Advocate Kgaleka thereafter was employed as a Special Advisor to the Minister for the Department of Public Administration and Service, and also at the Department of Home Affairs and Department of Finance, with a particular focus on the areas of administration, legal, legislation and policy development, strategy, compliance and governance. Advocate Kgaleka served on the Committee of Inquiry probing the state of affairs of municipalities across Gauteng. She's served on various boards and she's currently a board member of the International Ombudsman Institute. She's also a member of the UN Working Group of the International Ombudsman Institute and chair of the African Ombudsman Research Center. She's a co-drafter of the African Peer Review Mechanism, particularly the South African Charter of the National General Council, and she was recently elected as the President of the International Ombudsman Institute's African region. Her career spans 20 years of legal experience. She's a former first black female national chairperson of the Society of State Advocates and holds an LLB degree from UKZN and an LLM from the University of Johannesburg. She will now address us on the topic of rebuilding trust in public institutions, leadership, ethics and governance in times of transition.
Thank you very much, Program Director, for that kind introduction. Professor van der Westhuizen. A very good afternoon and thank you for having me at this university, to the Rector and Vice Chancellor, Professor Robert Balfour, the Deans of Faculties, my host, the Executive Director, Mr. Meko Magida, and the leadership within the Human Resources Department, Executive and Senior Management, Labour present here, the Student Representative Council, academics, professional staff, and the students of the UWC community, Public Protector South Africa staff present here, ladies and gentlemen, I bring you very warm greetings from Public Protector South Africa. Earlier on, Mr. Magida described me as an important person. I do not take that. What's important is the institution which I've been entrusted to lead. Mine is only a privilege that I've been identified to lead that institution. I say this because as part of the transitional phase of the public protector, there's been a serious dichotomy between the individual who leads the institution and the institution which it leads. And maybe many of the things that go wrong in our country and even across the globe is when those who've been entrusted with leadership confuse the authority and the power that they've been given by the people and the constitution of that country to be theirs. Why is this important? As we dissect the issues of leadership and culture, ethics, what is ethics? Aristotle, Greek professor, philosopher at that, describes ethics simply as being one's character. It's really who you are as an individual. And where does that start, who you are as an individual? Those of us who believe in Christianity, those who believe in the universe, would believe that before you have a human being, you actually have a spiritual being. Do we really internalize that as human beings, as we interact with ourselves and as we interact with others? And that boils down to leadership. Do we really come to terms what it is to be at the front? Is it just being at the front and always being at the front, but is it at times that you have to be at the back? Is that not also leadership? Now, looking at our country, trust in public institutions manifests itself when citizens assess themselves as promise-keeping, accountability, efficient, competent, fair, and honesty. When individuals have trust in public institutions, they expect their interaction with authorities to have a positive outcome rather than being detrimental to them. Conversely, a lack of trust in public institutions can lead to a range of social and political problems, and mostly, as we've seen in our country, economic challenges. A decline in institutional trust is linked with a rise in societal fragmentation, which citizens become more prone to endorse populist establishments which really do not speak to the true values and the principles of our Constitution. But because of desperation and because of lack of leadership, they seek leadership in other corners. Moreover, low trust limits the state's capacity to function efficiently, leading to a vicious cycle of ineffective governance and growing distrust. We are here today at a critical juncture of our democratic journey. In line with our theme this afternoon, I quote, "Rebuilding trust in public institutions, leadership, ethics, and governance in times of transition could not be more timely or urgent, but it requires agents to this urgency to implement what we think ought to be done." The evidence is stark and undeniable. Recent Afrobarometer data of, well, not so recent, 2021, reveals that trust in South African institutions has reached alarming lows, with only 43% of citizens expressing trust in the courts, and even lower figures in our parliament, sitting at 28%. The public protector itself was rated, together with the church, at 42%. This represents a significant decline from previous years and reflects what researchers term a democratic malice. The 2025 Edelman Trust Barometer South Africa nevertheless reveals that trust and faith in government is seeing a cautious shift upward, barking global trends. Business and NGOs remain the most trusted South African institutions, with 68% and 63% respectively. The media remains lower at 46%. However, while trust in government has suffered in the recent years, data shows a 7% increase. However, this rise in overall trust across the four main institutions is tempered by concerning findings around high levels of grievance against business, government, and the rich. With 71% of South Africans, which is 10% higher than the global average, hold a moderate or high sense of grievance, believing business and government serve only a selected few. Business and government actions hurt citizens, that the system favors the wealthy, and that the rich are getting richer at the expense of the poor. However, this is supported by the Sustainable Development Report to our country, which was released last year, which basically states that poverty, unemployment, and inequality in South Africa has deepened. Looking into the Zondo Commission's report, which I would not shy away from saying that it is a remedial action of the work of the public protector. The findings in the Zondo Commission laid bare the devastating impact of state capture in our institutional fabric. We witnessed the systemic infiltration and exploitation of state-owned enterprises, the weakening of oversight institutions, and the creation of what researchers call a shadow state that operated parallel to our constitutional democracy. Analyzing these events, what went wrong? Where did it all start? When we speak of the professionalization of our state, we speak of ensuring that those who are employed within the state have the correct qualifications, experience, but none of our regulations point to integrity. When we issue adverts, we state all the qualifications and experience that is required, but none of that speaks to integrity. Our KPIs within institutions are still centered around numbers, but never the quality and the impact of the work. Now, in state capture, analyzing what went wrong, it was the human behavior that went wrong. It's the human behavior that corrupted the systems. Now, why is this important for us? As we are transitioning, as the globe and as South Africa in particular, into AI, we speak about the ethics of AI, and as we are aware that the United Nations has actually adopted ethics to be at the center of AI. Now, who feeds into these applications? It is the human being. The big debate amongst public protector-like institutions is how do we enforce accountability in good governance in terms of AI? Who do we hold accountable? The robot or the human being? Now, this is a serious test for us as human beings. Is there going to come a time where the human being is going to deny having fed information into the robot, which resulted into the analytics and the entire process that takes place within the process of AI? It's an information. Where does that information come from? Where does it originate from? Now, what we've missed and that we continue to miss in state capture and the outcomes thereof is that, again, when we speak of professionalization of the state, we speak of ethics. We speak of it at the latter stage of the human behavior or the human life. A human being goes through an ecosystem, and that ecosystem starts from childhood. In early childhood development until the stage and even into the industry. If we lose inculcating and institutionalizing integrity and ethics at this stage, there's no way that you can mold a human being over the age of 20 into an ethical environmental structure. An upbringing of a human being is critical in the manner in which you shape a family, society, community, and ultimately a state in the globe. That is why in most communities the saying goes that you raise a child not for yourself, but you raise a child for the community. So that's the back to basics, basically, that we have to look at. What have been the far-reaching consequences as a result of the human conduct? Erosion of public confidence in government institutions, compromised service delivery affecting the most vulnerable, economic stagnation and reduced investor confidence, a culture of impunity that has threatened the rule of law. Now, all of this, they actually resulted undeniably into the outcomes of the Sustainable Development Report of deepening inequality, unemployment, and poverty, particularly for youth and women, basically undermining the core values and principles of our Constitution. It's been human behavior. It's been humans' character. So we should never underestimate a person's upbringing, what they have gone through in their lives, the culture that has shaped them in their lives, as central to the recruitment process. Because in an environment such as the university, Professor Balfour, what does it mean? It basically means that what impact and what outcomes are they going to achieve? So what type of professionals are going to be produced by that person? Because as you stand as a lecturer, you are the leader. You are shaping the outlook of the future in the human beings whom you are teaching. So we should never undermine that role. Professor van der Westhuizen, you've beautifully outlined the role of the public protector. I'm not going to get into that. But what is critical out of the role of the public protector is that as we exercise our powers in investigating malfeasance in state affairs, and state affairs basically means throughout the judiciary, parliament, and the executive, all administrative decisions within those sectors, local government, provincial and national government. We investigate over 1,000 institutions in our country. It's a mammoth task. But what does it require of the public protector? When the public protector is appointed in line with the Constitution, it says that it must be a fit and proper person. And you can undermine the fit and proper person, but when you look at the task that the person is entrusted with, it's critical that it becomes a fit and proper person, particularly with the dynamics in a developmental state. In particular, a state such as ours in our country, which we should never shy away from, that corruption has actually been a culture in our country from the times of colonialism into apartheid, and now in our democracy. So basically, over generations, we have inherited this culture of eroding our country. But we have to change things. Now, into sharing my own path of transition when I took over as the public protector in times of crisis, low morals that have been reported around the institution, but also the decline in trust internally in the institution and externally. It is that character that comes to play. And how did we manage this? And fortunately for me, I had a transitional phase of being an acting public protector, and many did not have that. And I had been fortunate to be the deputy public protector, so at least I already understood the institution. And at least the institution had an understanding of me. And that's very important, to first assess what is it that you are coming into. You need to know what you are dealing with. But most importantly, you have to put the people first. Yes, there's a task at hand to be delivered on, but if you do not put the people first, who is going to deliver on that task? There's one thing that we are missing as a country as we speak of austerity measures, etc., is the issue around wellness and capacity building. The first thing on budget cuts, they cut on capacity building. Currently in the state, I think you only need to spend around 1 to 3% of your budget on training. Nothing much is being mentioned on wellness. Now, my assessment was that even before you speak of the capacity of those who are able to deliver on the mandate at hand, is the wellness of the individuals who must deliver. And thereafter, conducting an organizational development to ensure whether do you have the right skills at the right place. That is important. At times, we tend to take people and put them in places where it is not the right place for them. And for me, that is very important. But most importantly, for you as a leader, you must assess whether are you at the right person at the right place. Because the challenges that come with leadership actually test that. Do you wake up in the morning and say, I probably shouldn't be doing this. I don't feel like doing this. Would you allow yourself to lead from the back? Do you acknowledge your own weaknesses? And do you pick up the strengths from your team that would complement your weaknesses? And do you allow your team to lead? If, as a leader, you believe that when you are not on the premises of your workplace, everything would collapse, you might as well not be there. Now, trust is important in leadership. You need to be a leader who trusts. If you do not trust the people whom you lead with and are leading, then it becomes a major challenge. The transition becomes difficult. We build a trust relationship. And how do you build a trust relationship? You inculcate a trust relationship around systems. You build strong systems that will even protect you from yourself. Because we are human beings. We are bound to make mistakes. And as you take decisions, and if you do take decisions, you will make mistakes. Now, it's critical to build systems, even if when you think of it, you don't like the system that you are building, because you're not building it for yourself. You are building it for the institution and the future of the institution. And that is what we did as the public protector, and we were guided by the jurisprudence, which was created by the courts. We've had 80% of our matters which were reviewed by the courts. So we basically had to go through each and every judgment and say, what systems do we need to build to enforce independence, impartiality, investigating without fear, favor, or prejudice? And how do we ensure that that is built into our standard of operating procedures, that is built into our guidelines, and that as human beings who must implement this, we live by these. An ethics code is critical for an institution to live by. Ethics champions who are outside of leadership, who would assess leadership, are critical. Because as leadership, you can't assess yourself. So those are the measures that we've had to build in place, but also put in place measures of feedback. At times as leaders, we do not accept feedback. No matter how hard or bitter it is, it's critical to be a leader who accepts feedback and takes criticism. And what impact does this have to our institution? I will not measure our impact through the number of cases that are being reported to us. Yes, they are on the rise. We receive about 12,000 cases per annum. But we've measured this on output. We've had to build relations with stakeholders, and our stakeholders is the state. The public protector can't effectively investigate if we do not have the cooperation of the state. Now, it develops a different posture and character of the public protector. Is being punitive all the time helpful in building? No. We have to look at other measures. The public protector has powers to take remedial action, which these the court have confirmed are binding powers. But the public protector also has powers to make recommendations. Now, we've lifted up this power of making recommendations, but also we've brought in another bulletin, which we call alert letters. When we pick up on an impropriety, we immediately write to that state institution or official and say, this has come to our attention, what are you doing about it? That gives the public protector who's always on the alert. The impact that this has had, we've seen the increase into the implementation of our remedial actions from 2% to 52% just in 2 years. It's still low, but it's been a steep increase in a short space of time. We've also seen an increase in the implementation of our recommendations from around 30% to about 80%. But also we've seen an increase in collaborations with other state institutions, which has become impactful. But we've also seen an increase in state officials not doing what is wrong because they know that the public protector is watching them. There was an article, I think towards the end of 2023, of the mayor in the Northwest who refused to sign an appointment and said, this appointment is irregular. If I sign it, I'll have the public protector on my case. Those are interesting impacts because ours is to prevent the impropriety. That is really what we want to see, more than reacting to the impropriety. We see what reaction has done. During state capture, we lost about 500 billion as a country. We've only recovered around 11 billion of that. It's not even a fraction of what we have lost. Now, the intention of the establishment of our institutions and our mandates, it is to prevent such a loss. Imagine what 500 billion would have done to service delivery in our country, what that money would have done to lifting the poor in our country and rural areas, areas which are not urban, to investment in our economy. We see what has been done to the infrastructure of our cities, the city of Johannesburg, Durban, Pretoria, East London. They are no-go cities. Now it becomes more expensive to do business in South Africa because people need to go to Sandton to do business when they're in Johannesburg. In Pretoria to the more affluent areas, Waterkloof, etc., which is more expensive. Investors rather be in the city centre. Just recently, I was informed that the bigger chambers in Johannesburg have closed down because of crime. Now the advocates must go and rent chambers in Sandton. How expensive is that going to become? But also, what does it mean to the fees? And what does it mean to the ordinary people? So the cost of corruption is high, but what causes this cost is the lack of institutionalization of ethics. Even amongst our political parties, the standard is still the law. Have we breached the law? Because the law is prescribed, but ethics are not prescribed. Ethics is simply how you must conduct yourself. And that is what the measure must be. The measure must be how you must walk, how you must lead as a leader. And that is not necessarily written down, but we know that it's wrong when we do wrong. The standard must be our consciousness. What does it tell us? Now, what has this done within our institution? It has actually even decreased our litigation. Over the years, we were spending about 30% of our total budget on litigation. What this meant for the institution was that we couldn't train investigators or any of our personnel. We didn't have a wellness program for our personnel. We could not afford capable people. We didn't even have a strategic human resources department. We had the human resources, but it was not fit for purpose. We didn't have an organizational design that was fit for purpose. And therefore, we couldn't produce reports which are impactful. Our litigation has decreased from 80% to 8%. And that has assisted us to direct our resources where they should go. We are even able to outsource critical and scarce skills, such as digital cyber skills. And what has this produced for us? We've been able to successfully complete the Inokimgijima municipality investigation. Now, what happened in this matter, which is critical for human resources practitioners? At Inokimgijima, first and foremost, a head of supply management was employed who was flagged at Makana municipality in respect of having fraudulent qualifications. How this person was employed in Makana, how they transitioned to Inokimgijima, from Inokimgijima to another municipality. Now, how does this affect? This is clearly a person who is not a person of character, who should be of service, whether it's public or private service. But that character eroded further at Inokimgijima, committed all the malfeasance and maladministration, thereafter moved to another municipality. Now, what impact does that have? That has the impact, firstly, that the children around Lesotho Stadium, Egomani, until today, their development is still compromised. The youth of that area is unable to engage in sport. There is no stadium after 22 million rands was paid by the state. But it becomes more difficult for investigations. This person has moved to another municipality. There is no provision in any legislation in South Africa for discipline of an official who has moved from one municipality to another. But is there accountability? We had to make do as the public protector, and the implementation of this remedial action is still due. Where we have taken remedial action that, in line with the Constitution, that there's one state in South Africa, no matter where you are employed, you still work for the state. There's one fiscus, which is the national fiscus. Doesn't matter where the funds have been siphoned, they are from one fiscus. Whilst you are employed in the South African state and it has been funds of this fiscus, you should be able to account in our state. Now, why are we unable to enforce ethics? It's because we merely think accountability is about responding. There's no consequence management, and consequence management is a key feature of accountability. When you redress the wrong, our Constitution, by the way, speaks of accountability and consequence management because it speaks of redressing the imbalances of the past. So in this instance, the prejudice will persist if there's no consequence management. But also, the CFO in this municipality also moves as municipal manager to another municipality because the standard is breaching the law. At that time, they were not charged with anything. However, there was a clear Auditor General's report on what had transpired at Inokimgijima. But because in our adverts and in our recruitment processes, we do not test integrity and ethics. You merely ask a person, have you been charged? No. Were you previously convicted? No. Nowhere do we say, let's go and look at the governance reports during this person's tenure, because those are the true tests of ethics, of how that person had conducted themselves in that position. So that is why the state ended up losing 22.7 million rand in that instance. Now, remember, this is because they have now been caught by the public protector. How much more has the state lost, which has not been reported? We look at irregular appointments in the state, and I really want to link irregular appointments to the erosion of good governance. We recently issued a report in the Northern Cape where this is a struggling municipality, unable to deliver services. The municipal manager issues instructions and says, advertise 16 posts. This is what we are looking for. And that was because the municipality was not delivering services and they didn't have personnel. Human resources, because that is an instruction from the municipal manager, they did as the municipal manager said. No processes were followed. Now, what is the ethical thread and moral compass of that person who's head in human resources, who's allowing a process like that, which costed the municipality millions and millions of rands, employing people who are not even qualifying for those positions? I normally say, even at Public Protector, when we conduct interviews, I say to human resources, your job is to guide us, and your job is to enforce processes within this recruitment process, and it's to ensure that processes have been followed. It's the same as supply chain management. When procurement goes wrong, where's the SCM specialist who sits in those evaluation and adjudication committees? Now, professionalization and leadership doesn't necessarily lie with the person who's leading the organization, but in every area where you are leading. Because once the moral compass breaks there, it affects the entire organization. We saw how governance erosion in organization has affected our entire economy as a country and has affected lives, and how it has affected the future. We grapple with uncertainty as a country. The last example I want to make is the one of Thabo Bester when he escaped prison. Now, this is a convicted rapist, and yet he's able to establish himself in what we think should be an institution that keeps prisoners away from the public. And what that has caused, and how much it has costed our country to look for Thabo Bester. And we have lost all of this just because of human behavior. Now, the accountability mechanisms that we need to look at in practice is that it demands systemic follow-ups and implementation of remedial actions. Because we have actually seen through data that where remedial actions are not implemented, and it's the same as the AG's recommendations, the maladministration persists. It starts off probably as a mistake, becomes a maladministration, and it ends up being corruption. IMF and World Bank reports dictate that South Africa is rather slower in implementation of remedials and reforms. But what does that translate into? The continuous erosion of our governance, but also more reports on corruption. So this is an entire ecosystem. And what does this ecosystem require in the broader sense? It requires us as institutions who are entrusted with enforcing accountability, good governance, the rule of law, but most importantly, human rights and freedoms. Because these acts affect human rights and freedoms. It then requires us to also form an ecosystem. We can't work in isolation. And this includes academics and research. We require that. We've seen that gap in our work. Now, in terms of institutional transition, as leaders, we need to embody what scholars call transformational leadership. We need to inspire positive change. We need to empower others. And what I've found beneficial in empowering others is that even when you're about to slip as a leader, they quickly pick you up because they're empowered and they know what ought to be done. And by the way, our investigation methodology is what happened, what should have happened, and what is the discrepancy between what happened and what should have happened. So the measure, it's not what you do, it's what you ought to do. Now, I want to take us through the 4 key components of transformational leadership, which is admired influence. Leaders must serve as ethical role models. We need to earn trust through consistent behavior and integrity acts. We need to be moral exemplars who earn the credibility. What does this mean? You need to demonstrate unwavering integrity at all times. You even need to subject yourself to scrutiny. You need to model transparency and accountability. And this comes with a lot of humility. You need to have humility as a leader, because if you do not have humility, when people challenge your leadership, you would always want to remind them that, hey, I'm the public protector. And I always to say, when as a leader, when you must remind the people that you are actually the one leading, then there's a problem. One thing I've built in the corridors of the public protector, it doesn't matter in which office I'm at. When we sit and we discuss a case, you wouldn't tell who's the public protector in that room. Because we would be interacting with facts. We would be arguing the law. Because I'm the public protector doesn't mean that I know most. And not even once, and even when I'm tempted to, I prevent myself from reminding colleagues that I am the public protector. Building trust through consistency between stated values and actual behavior, particularly during times of crisis. It's during the most difficult times where, as a leader, you must actually be the one who listens. Acting as ethical role models who inspire followers to aspire to higher standards of conduct. Inspirational motivation, articulating a compelling vision that motivates followers to exceed expectation. What we tend to do as leaders, and particularly when you take over an institution in crisis, there's a temptation of labeling people. This one worked with so-and-so. And I think we need to desist from that conduct and build new relations and build people and lead people in the direction that they should go. The Stafford Public Protector that produced reports from 1995, we are 30 years this year. Some of them is still the staff that's there, that's producing the reports that we take out every quarter. now. It's the same people. Now, how do you manage these people in the transitional phase? Is articulating a shared vision and mission. It's tempting to walk into a place and say, this is my vision, this is what I want to have done. Very tempting. And at times, people want you to do that. I've desisted from doing that. The vision and mission which we have now for the next 5 years as the public protector actually came from the lowest ranking employees at public protector, and they were processed at leadership level. And we carried them out through together. We need to connect daily work to constitutional values and democratic principles. We need to make practical what the Constitution expects of us. We need to inspire confidence. We need to communicate with passion and conviction about the transformative potential of ethical public service. But at the same time, we shouldn't run away from engaging the private service. We have seen in state capture how the public service and the private service have collaborated to erode governance in our country. We need to encourage innovation. We need not shy away from new and creative ideas. Now there's a contradiction of the young and the old and the experienced and the inexperienced. Taking from Marxism, we would know that it's through contradictions that we're able to have progress and development. So experience and inexperience together are critical for development. And those most innovative are not necessarily us older ones. AI, those who catch the system much faster, are those who are rather less experienced than us in certain areas, but they know how to navigate. They are less fearful. They probably know less, and therefore they've got no barriers. Individualized consideration. Supporting and developing each team's members' potential while building collective capacity. Mentorship and coaching is important, even for yourself as a leader. Understanding the strengths and aspirations of others and help them achieve their aspirations. Creating opportunities for professional development and fostering a supportive environment where team members feel valued and empowered to contribute meaningfully. We speak of an ethical governance framework, and fortunately this morning we had a conversation with the Auditor General on how do we make practical of this ethical governance framework that we speak of. What is it in our investigations that we want people to see? In South Africa, we are very good at developing papers. We've got the NDP. I really hope that the national dialogue is actually going to take stock of the implementation of the NDP, because we are only 5 years left. But I think it's for institutions such as ours and institutions of higher learning to actually partner and see how do we make real time of the implementation of the professionalization of the state. Now, what becomes the critical role of human resources? I mean, we call it human capital, human development. It's to shape itself to ensure that there's ethical recruitment, there's performance management, training and development, but also its contribution to policy development, cultural transformation. Ethics is a culture. We need to foster environments where ethical behavior is expected, recognized, and rewarded. In our country, with the abuse of whistleblowers, ethics actually punished, there's still not real justice for whistleblowers. More times than ever, systems erode and corruption takes place because people have realized that ethical conduct doesn't pay. Just recently, my friend's son was arrested for speeding. He went through the criminal justice system. And the first day when he was in the cells, he kept on texting his mother on how some of the people who've been arrested are going out because they are paying about 7,000 rands to the police, the interpreter, and others there. And for that young man, he said to his mother, I'm not going to pay, I'm going to go through the system. But how his ethics actually punished him, I stand here wondering whether, should the same happen to him tomorrow, would he still do that? So we've built a system in our country through major critical spheres where ethics is actually punished. And I think that's something that we need to stand against. Because some people are unethical because they just don't want to go through the tedious process. And those who are unethical and corrupt find it easy to go through. Now, through international best practices, we have to learn. We need to make government more transparent and accessible to citizens, showcasing the positive impact of public servants, creating meaningful opportunities for citizens in participatory governance. Government can't govern alone. And implementing robust accountability mechanisms with real consequences. And this really starts at elections phase, how we elect our leaders, how we take that choice to elect our leaders. We see a lot of food parcels going around during elections and all sorts of things, buying votes. Should we be the citizens whose votes are bought? If you are paid to vote for somebody, you are actually promoting corruption and unethical conduct. And how do you think that once that person is leading, they will be an ethical leader? And that's really where it starts. And that's where the South African context is when it comes to ethics. Now, the situational analysis of the World Economic Forum is that there needs to be a move away from a mindset focused solely on fighting corruption to an approach based on building trust and integrity at all levels of society, which requires setting the correct tone at the top, building a culture of integrity through responsive leadership, strengthening judicial and law enforcement institutions, enhancing private sector compliance, and self-reporting. In conclusion, I call upon all of us to a call of action to craft the way forward in rebuilding trust in public institutions, which is not only a responsibility of any single office or person. The preamble of the Constitution, I quote, says, "We, the people of South Africa." Now this requires collective action for all sectors of society. I therefore challenge each and every one of us to champion ethical leadership, to build ethical systems, to foster transparency, develop ethical capacity, and measure and monitor. And by the way, as human beings, as systems, we evolve. And evolution is like transition. It can't always be within. It's also external. It's like revival, right? And therefore, we need to accept external input in shaping ourselves differently, in shaping our systems differently. But also, we need to take a collective responsibility. Moreover, we would ask one another, what are you doing? What are you doing? What have you done? It should rather be, what are we doing? What can we do together? And that is how we are going to shape this transitional phase in our country. It's been 30 years. We've got many more years. But unfortunately, we do not have the time. We've got this generation that needs to take a stand. It doesn't matter how much of integrity you are, how much ethical you are, if you do not have the courage to enforce ethical governance and to inculcate ethics as a culture, then it is as good as nothing. We need courageous leadership to build a better South Africa for future generations. Thank you.
I want to thank Advocate Koleka for giving us much to think about this afternoon. I was going to give an overview, but there was really so much to work with in what we've heard from Advocate Koleka today. And so I just want to highlight two things. And the one is the erosive effect on governance of corruption. How corruption erodes governance, and how that has an economic knock-on effect. We heard the figure of 500 billion rands lost through state capture. The incredible anti-developmental effect of corruption, therefore, the anti-developmental impact of corruption, and how it actually hits those people who are most dependent on a functioning state and on a state that serves. So thank you so much for that. And then the other question is also around ethics as a culture, how we inculcate a culture of ethics, and our individual roles in that, and our roles also as members of collectives. So thank you so much for giving us a lot to think about. And I'm going to open the floor now. We've got about 20 minutes for questions and comments. And I want to, of course, implore people to stick to our topic that we've got at hand today: rebuilding trust in public institutions, leadership, ethics and governance in times of transition. And let's keep it at no more than 2 minutes per question or comment. And as we've already had our keynote address for the day, we try to avoid making another keynote address. So, and please introduce yourself. Let's start in the front here. Just don't speak up, please.
Thanks. Well, thank you very much. My name is Sebong Skoja, final year student. I have a very loaded question for the public protector. What do you reckon should be done by not just chaplainized institutions but also the legislature in remedying the ethical crisis that we have in the public sector, as well as in parastatals and even in higher education institutions, where those who are charged with fiduciary responsibilities find themselves no longer serving the interests of the public or the interests of those institutions that they've been appointed into, but serving their own interests. And a very clear example of this, for instance, is the CETA board appointments that are to be withdrawn, and also quite recently the appointment of the IDC board, where we saw the appointment of a former premier of a province being appointed into a board of a state parastatal. So what do you think that should be done, not just by the Public Protector's Office, but other chaplain institutions as well as Parliament in general?
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Damaris Kiewitz. I have two, the wellness and capacity building that's been touched on. Our laws are clear on growth, you know, and it could be growth in advancing in what you started with in employment and where you are at. So at this institution, there's no growth development for administrative staff. You've started here years ago, you will leave here the same as you started. So is there growth, even though you have built your capacity? And I think with where our country is, it raises a serious concern. Do we expect people to be stagnated in where they are, or do we as leaders ensure we build the capacity and build second-tier leadership instead of bringing people in from outside, that there are people within that we grow? And then ethical leadership, I think I was shocked the other day when a friend of mine who started here 2 months ago left, and he said, Damaris, I cannot explain to you how I want to be known for who I am ethically and not be in an institution where I'm going to need to compromise my ethics. So when we lead from the top, do we lead knowing that people are watching?
Thank you for that. We have a question up in the gallery. Can you be able to project? Thanks. Another question over here.
Thank you very much. My name is Jaap Visser from the Dalla Oma Institute. Thanks, Father Protector, for a very thoughtful lecture. I wanted to latch on to one issue that you mentioned about the collaboration between the Public Protector and other state institutions. But the question is, what is the scope for greater collaboration between the Public Protector and the NPA? You've been a prosecutor yourself, so you know both institutions very well. One of the challenges that we come across in our research on local government and corruption in local government, combating it, is that disciplinary investigations would take place, perhaps even Human Rights Commission investigation would take place, Public Protector investigation would take place, but still there's no real accountability because the individuals that committed these nefarious acts still escape accountability towards the NPA, because the NPA is not able to use the information or is not willing to use the information that comes out in all the other investigations. So the NPA then has to start all over again from scratch, even though there's a wealth of information that has been laid there in all kinds of commissions, even from provincial government investigating municipalities, Public Protector, Human Rights Commission, disciplinaries, but then still there is no follow-up and no consequence management in the NPA. What is the scope for greater collaboration between these kind of investigations and actually getting to see the crooks in yellow overalls?
I think we've got a mouthful now for you to please answer, and then we'll take I think a very short second round as well.
Thank you very much. Quite thought-provoking questions. the role of Parliament. The role of Parliament is very well legislated, even from our Constitution. What we have seen to be a challenge, which is what we've actually discussed with the legislature and with Parliament, is that it all starts within the political power. If you see in political parties across the spectrum, those who are more senior are in the executive. For instance, the president of the country is the president of the ANC, so he's the most senior. Now, the speakers, whether in legislature or in our national parliament, are not as senior as he is. Now, it is Parliament that must hold the executive accountable. So, that plays a factor in accountability, the seniority, but also the aspirations. Those who are in Parliament aspire to be ministers. So, where it should start is for those who are in the legislatures and in Parliament to take their job seriously, that their role is to hold the executive accountable in line with the Constitution. But I must say, Siyabonga, I'm quite impressed with this Parliament. In the very same matter that you are alluding to, the appointments in the city boards, it's Parliament that actually flagged these. So we are seeing Parliament being more active. And probably the multi-government system is going to assist in accountability. Because there's very little room now of one protecting the other. And we see that the chair of this portfolio committee and the minister actually come from the same political party. But the portfolio committee pushed in ensuring that the minister accounts. The powers are there, they've got the powers. It's the political will to enforce oversight and accountability. We work closely with Parliament, we share our remedial actions with Parliament, but you would recall from the Nganga judgment when Parliament actually reviewed the Public Protector's report and the Public Protector was saved by the courts. But the court said, no, that's not the role of Parliament. So there's a very careful consideration that needs to be done there, but we do also send our reports to Parliament so that they exercise oversight and by ensuring that the departments implement. If they don't implement, they must then take them on review. So the legislature's role really in remedying the ethical crisis is for them to be ethical themselves and take their roles seriously. And I think there is some improvement. Actually, there's major improvement from what we've seen in the earlier years of our democracy. It's true that we need to grow people, and I spoke about that, development for retention, etc. I must be honest, when I went around all the units, even in my institution, admin staff was complaining about the same. And I think the challenge becomes where the focus is on core business and forgetting that in order for core business to strive, support services needs to be strong as well. It needs to be strengthened. And I think that's a very critical consideration for leadership as well, to put as much focus on support services, which is what we have done now because support services has come out clear on that. But as well, you see that core business doesn't do as well if the support service is weak in terms of training, being part of the environment, equally recognized, because they are not less professionals. You would find that some of them are even more qualified. It's just that they are in a different discipline and not in a discipline that's core business. So it's very, very important of building the team individually but together in the different sectors, because if you leave one out, it causes a lot of despondency. The reality is that we need to build staff not only for retention for our institution, but for them to be competitive outside of the institution. Because growth cannot happen for everyone within the same institution. There can only be so many positions and for so many people. But it's a good consideration for leaders that before you look externally, you have to establish whether you do not have that skill and even the potential internally. But what does it call upon? If you do not have a succession plan as a leader, then there will not be a consequential retention of employees within the institution. So the succession planning is very important. And the benefit of promoting internally is institutional memory. And you cannot trade that in for anything. But at the same time, an institution does need fresh ideas. So it is really interacting with these contradictions as leaders, but prepare employees for other industries so that they can be competitive outside that institution. As leaders, we ought to know that people are watching when we are leading. We ought to know. But how do you know when people are watching when you've not created systems of transparency and accountability even for you as a leader? So it is important that transparency starts with you. For instance, in Public Protector South Africa, when a report is going to be brought to me as a Public Protector, it comes through a submission. And the submission would summarize what action they require from me, why they require that action, and they motivate for that action. And if I disagree, I need to motivate why I disagree on the submission. And even when we do our quality assurance, I need to motivate. The standard I've put is, okay, you say this, what's your authority for this? Where do you get it from? So even you as a leader, the standard that you put for yourself should not be bullyism, it should be authority. And authority, you would get it from some way. But again, it goes with that trust leadership. And I commend your friend for leaving if he found the environment not to be conducive for him or her to speak out on ethics, rather than to be swallowed by the system, because that's what happened to many people. But otherwise, I think as well, it is important for all establishments to have internal review mechanisms. Basically, your own complaints mechanism, where employees are able to report corruption or any unethical conduct that would not be attached to a person, that probably could be independent, a system, for example, that can be monitored over time, assessed, and have the requisite person who would attend to that system. That is very important in order to guard ethical conduct within one's institution. Do I think whether the current legislative framework would shape how I conduct my investigations? Yes, definitely. Not just the legislative framework, but also the policy framework. But it starts with me as a person, right? There's a reason why the Constitution says the public protector must be a fit and proper person. Because the investigations that come before the public protector can be against anyone. Times even people I know, what must guide me? It's my ethical conduct. Am I fit and proper? Across the world, I mean, we've got Seychelles, which is a very small country, and everybody knows everybody almost in Seychelles, and most people are even related. But the Seychelles has got a public protector who must investigate those people who they even have a closer relation with. But what must guide them is their ethical conduct, but also the systems that they put in place. I said earlier on, I have put in systems that would even protect me against myself. There is no way that I would wake up one day and register a matter myself, because that's not how the system allows it. We've got a case management system, and people who've got a code to the case management system are those who work in that section. Even I do not have it. I am of last resort in the institution. So the policies we've put, yes, but also we've made legislative proposals, amendments to our legislation, which is now with the Department of Justice, which deals with the issue that I spoke of earlier on, the separation between the natural person and the juristic person. The public protector is the person and the public protector is the institution. Those are very important. So we've made those additional recommendations to the amendments of our legislation. But whilst we are awaiting those amendments, our systems are quite advanced in protecting any unethical conduct by anyone for that matter. But also, we've taken time to build a resilient team. We've taken time to inculcate knowledge in our team. For us, even the most junior person, if you say something, they ask you, okay, where's the reference to that public protector? That's why I say, in our boardroom, you wouldn't tell who the public protector is when we are conducting quality assurance. We've got several quality assurance fora within the institution. Where I sit before I sign off a matter is the last one. I sit with the CEO, the COO, the head of our legal services, the head of the province that will be producing the report. So the reports are not produced from the public protector's desk. So, and by the time the report comes to me individually to sign off and do my final edits, if I would change content, I would have to go back to we call it a full bench. I would have to go back to full bench and motivate why the content will have to be changed. And why didn't I think of that at the time we were sitting doing that quality assurance? So the system is well built in, and the good thing is that it's an electronic system. So if I change anything on the case management system, it will dictate that I went into the case management system and I changed instructions and that the decision is not aligned to the evidence. Even our evidence, we load it onto the system. So everything needs to be aligned, and as you know, in law, we work with evidence based on facts and the law itself. So I'm quite comfortable with that process. The last one, collaborations. We are collaborating with the NPA. Firstly, I think our own act forces us to collaborate because it says that the public protector shall refer matters, and amongst others, the National Prosecuting Authority. But we are in discussions and we are taking it further in practice with the NPA. For instance, where we pick up a matter that is under prosecution, which we are investigating, the teams do interact. In the Enoch and Gijima matter, our team interacted with the asset forfeiture unit and so forth to ensure that we are able to deal with the low-hanging fruits. Because I think, unfortunately, the criminal justice system, not just in our country, throughout, it does grind very slowly. I was in Malta a few months back, and they were celebrating, and Malta's got a small population, and they were celebrating a conviction in a murder case that was on trial for over 8 years. So I thought to myself, maybe we are too hard on our criminal justice system, you know, because it seems to be the trend around the world. But I'm not saying that's how it should be, and that is why correctly, Mr. Fisser, we need to ensure that there are collaborations, which I've just outlined, the Enoch and Gijima case in which we've collaborated in. And at the same time, we do not want to contaminate evidence because we know the strict rules of the law of evidence, right? Those who studied law or who are studying law, admissibility is a factor. The reason why a commission can conclude, run in the manner in which it runs, is because the rules of law are different for a commission. Prosecution is beyond reasonable doubt. I mean, many of us, I think, did watch the Zondo Commission, and those who are lawyers could detect even from there, this won't be admissible, more work needs to be done, you know, for this. The public protector's investigations is on a balance of probability. So, which is still below the bar of what is required for beyond reasonable doubt. But that is why we try and make sure that we finalize our reports so that at least we can issue remedial action that remove the person from the system whilst the prosecutorial investigations are ongoing. But we need collaborations beyond the NPA. We need the voices of civil society, we need the media, because we've seen that pressure actually helps to get action. So those are the kind of further collaborations that I think we would also to emphasize on. Thank you.
Thank you, Kaleka. We're almost out of time. I think we can possibly squeeze in one very short question up there. Yes, thank you. That will be the last one. Yeah. I see we're sort of rolling on. Yeah. Okay, great. I think we'll wrap up on that note. And it draws us neatly back to the question of trust and how to rebuild trust in an important institution such as the public protector.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, democratic analysis, we actually see it in our election processes. Some say there's apathy by youth in particular towards our democratic processes, and particularly the elections. So we see the outcomes of the elections that the youth are less participatory therein, which is quite worrying because the youth are the future of this country. And elections are actually futuristic. You don't elect for the past or for now, you elect for the next 5 years. And by that time, probably even if you were a youth now, in 5 years' time, you're no longer a youth, but also the impact of participating in democratic processes are basically on you more than those who are actually in power. Is it temporary or is it systemic? I'm afraid it's becoming systemic. And as I said earlier on, it calls for urgency, and it calls for agents for this urgency. Each revolution requires revolutionaries. Are we prepared to be revolutionaries in this revolution against corruption? What is it that bothers us most as South African? Statistics show that it's corruption. Who is prepared to sacrifice themselves? I ended with courageous leadership. Does it only call upon me as the public protector? No, it calls upon each and every one of us. And as you concluded on saying the youth feel that it's pointless to report to the police, can't be. The youth of 1976 didn't feel that it's pointless to fight because they were going to be shot at by the apartheid government, and because the laws allowed them to. They took up. They sacrificed themselves. That's why we shouldn't take this democracy for granted. Blood was shed for this democracy. But if we are not prepared to lose in order to gain, then things are going to stay as they are. It's going to be pointless. Not just for you, but it's going to be pointless for the future. And what is going to happen? The future of South Africa will be on foreign streets. They'll be treated the same way that we receive foreigners in our country. And that will be you. That will be your children. So it calls upon courage for all of us, really. Whether you think you lead or whether you think you don't lead. But we need to identify what is it that is urgent for us as a country. And what agents do we need, and with what urgency do we confront that? And I think in order to stop the furtherance in the erosion of our governance, we need to tackle corruption in a systemic manner. And that's part of how we are now carrying out our mandate as the public protector, and the AG is also doing the same. Where we are being developmental, for instance, in the Inagum-Gijima matter again, one of our remedial actions to the National Treasury is that in the regulations for the Public Procurement Act now, they must ensure that there is an integrity test for business that does business with the state. That means a lot, because big business is going to say, I'm not going to have all my financials out there, I actually don't need this, you know. So it's a catch-22 situation, but we have to do it as a country, because the characteristics that we see is that those who do business with the state, when they receive payments from the state, we don't see a trend of them paying for material, for employees, etc. They rather cash out that money. Where does that money go to? So we really require systemic reforms for the systemic challenges which we are facing, if we do not want those to be permanent. But I really wish that the youth can mobilize itself, not only around political parties, you know, but really around what the common purpose is for young people currently, and align according to that, and really assist our country in the crisis in which it finds ourselves. The youth played a very critical role back then, and I do believe that the youth today is even more capable, because first and foremost, the laws in our country allows for public participation, they allow for freedom of speech and so forth, and participation, and that at least things are not as bad as they were. There's media in our country which can report on anyone and anything, so there's more room for the youth to be more revolutionary. Thank you.
Thanks so much to Africa from my side. I want to invite invite to the front Mrs. Alvida Sias, who's the Director of Human Resources, tasked with service excellence, to do the vote of thanks for us.
Good afternoon, and thank you to our lovely Program Director, Professor Westhuizen, for handing over. We have arrived at the closing of this very important seminar today. And good afternoon again, Advocate Aleka from our public protector, as well as officials from our office that has been working very closely with our department to make this occasion very special today. Also to our members of executives, our deans, our leaders, colleagues, as well as of the participants and students, and also the colleagues online. Thank you so much for joining us today. As we conclude the seminar today, colleagues and participants, we do so at a moment of profound significance. Our nation continues to navigate our democratic consolidation, whilst our very own institution is at a very critical point of moments of reflections where we're embarking on our vision for the next 5 years, where we are looking and we are consolidating the UWC way. We have recently launched also a culture survey, and I do think that the keynote speaker of today made various and reflected mostly around ethics, values, and what is our agency and our role in all of that. We are busy rebuilding the trust also in our institution. I think we are also faced as a university with various questions in terms of our identity. We've also heard one of our support staff highlighting the fact that there's no growth at the university, and so we need to listen to the voices. The Office of the Public Protector plays a very critical role in terms of the moral compass. And so I want to encourage our public protector that she's been mandated with a very, very critical role in establishing the trust of the public. I think we've all been exposed and we've all seen the media reports, and thank you so much for sharing with us some of those cases and highlighting the importance of your role in. Some of the key reflections of today that I got from the keynote speaker is around we need to get back to the basics. We need to invest in human behavior and human conduct. We have to serve the public. This is also a public institution. We are in service of our students, as our clients. Their voices should also be heard. And so as we draw into a close, I want to thank everybody here today for their attendance. A special thank you to Advocate Aleka for sharing your invaluable insights. We're also sharing and celebrating Women's Month, and I think it's the rector also opened and the rector also made reference to its significance that today as public protector, your voice are heard in the boardrooms, you are leading the mandate of the Office of the Public Protector, and your voice as a woman are heard. I also want to thank this afternoon Professor Christie van der Westhuizen for facilitating the session this afternoon. Professor Christie is a professor in the Faculty of Arts and Humanities, and thank you for reminding us we will not be having another keynote, but only thanks this afternoon. Thank you so much. Please give her a hand as well. In the absence of our Rector and Vice Chancellor, thank you to Professor Balfour for sharing his vision, for also confirming his commitment to transformation and to leading this university to the next level, and to invest in our people, to invest in transformation, and also for supporting the HR Leadership Series. To our deans, you have a unique role to play in shaping our young minds, to cultivate a growth mindset towards our students and make them and influence their leadership behaviors and the capabilities. You play a very, very important role. We have 6 out of the 7 deans here today with us. And a special word to Professor Muller, who just stepped into the role of the Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Humanities. You also have an important role to play in shaping that department. To our Executive Director, Mr. Meko Magida, the HR Leadership Series was shaped within the office of Mr. Magida, and also together with some of our interns that was part of the Presidential Youth Program. He's no longer with us, but he leaves lasting memories. He was very vital in terms of the relationship with the Office of the Public Protector. And so thank you, Mr. Magida. You have spoken about the series that will be coming up, and we invite the community, the university community, to please continue to participate. Today we are a bit disappointed. We had over 300 colleagues that signed up. We had to close the link to registration, and some people just did not turn up. Colleagues, there's also a call to action that when we do also commit ourselves, that we give action to that. We've taken away opportunity from colleagues that could have been here today. So thank you so much, Mr. Magida. And then also to your office, Sharon Dankers, who's been responsible for all the logistics, together with a lot of admin staff also in the HR department. And so we thank you for assisting with that. Institutional advancement, and also the Student Media Association, or the student group that's here today. Thank you for your services, our AVS department, as well as our Department of Risk and Compliances for the security services. On that note, colleagues, I want to close the session, and I want to remind us of our duty to be an agent of change, to influence the behaviors of ethics. It's not only about the values written on the walls, but it is in the daily action that we take and decisions, so that when we do intersect, when good governance intersects with self-interest, that we are reminded by the powerful words of our public protector, how do we erode issues of ethics that's not principled, favoritism, and how do we manage and how do we move forward as a university, as a community to influence. Thank you so much, colleagues.